I realized something was wrong the moment I stepped inside, because instead of the sterile, beige little cottage I'd booked for the weekend, I found myself staring into a home that actually felt lived in. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the kitchen island. There were keys on the hook, mail on the counter, and a faint, musky cologne in the air that made the room feel like it belonged to someone who hadn't planned to leave. And yet, I walked in anyway. The code had worked. The street matched. I was exactly where the app told me to go. So why did it feel like I had just broken into someone's life? I was in Asheville for a long overdue solo getaway. 38 years old. Single again. Exhausted by city noise and men who said they wanted to connect, but couldn't look you in the eye for longer than 30 seconds without checking their phone. I wasn't running from anything exactly, but I wasn't quite sure what I was running toward either. Just stillness. Space. That's what I thought I'd booked. Instead, I was standing in the foyer of a modern cabin tucked into a forested hillside that smelled like cedar, strong coffee, and maybe trouble. The door creaked shut behind me. I stood there frozen for a second, backpack still over one shoulder, trying to decide if I'd somehow misread everything. The silence was thick, but it wasn't empty. And then I heard footsteps. Soft, slow, confident, coming from the hallway. He stepped into the room wearing joggers, no shirt, a towel slung over his shoulder, and an expression that said I had about 3 seconds to explain myself. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, lean but clearly strong, his body the kind that came from working with your hands, not chasing numbers on a scale. He had scruff on his jaw, damp curls falling across his forehead, and a tattoo peeking from under his collarbone that made my breath catch before I could help it. He stopped in the doorway, one eyebrow raised. "Can I help you?" I blinked. I booked this place through Airbnb. Check-in was at 2. He narrowed his eyes. "I didn't list it this weekend." I fumbled for my phone, pulled up the confirmation email, turned the screen to him. "Look, right address. Code worked." He looked at the screen, then back at me, then something shifted. "Shit," he muttered, scrubbing a hand over his face. "You're supposed to be at the guest house. My brother owns this property too. He probably listed the wrong door code." "So I just walked into your actual house?" "Pretty much." We both stood there, awkward silence ballooning between us. Then he surprised me. "You hungry?" "What?" "I was about to make a late lunch, and you already broke in. Might as well make it worth your time." He turned back toward the kitchen without waiting for my answer. I should have left, called the host, found the right entrance, played it safe. But something about him, his voice, his presence, the way he moved like he wasn't rattled by much, made me pause, made me curious. I dropped my bag at the door and followed him in. He introduced himself as Eli, 39, carpenter, former firefighter, and yes, single. He didn't volunteer that last part casually. It came up after I mentioned the trip was just for me. We sat across from each other at a reclaimed wood table while he made us sandwiches and poured me a beer like this was completely normal. Like men just wandered into the wrong houses and found something better all the time. "So," he said, handing me a plate, "you come to Asheville to get lost? Or to be found?" I laughed, more nervously than I meant to. "I came to get away. From noise. From apps. From people." He leaned back in his chair. "Guess that didn't work out, huh?" I smiled. "No, but maybe I landed somewhere better." He smiled back, and right then I knew. I was in the wrong Airbnb, but I was starting to think it was the right mistake. After lunch, I stayed. That's how natural it felt. Sitting across from Eli like we'd done this before, and not just once, but a dozen times. There was something about the way he watched me. Not scanning, not judging, but actually seeing, that made it easy to forget I was supposed to be somewhere else. He sat with one ankle resting on his knee, broad shoulders relaxed, his forearm resting on the table just close enough that if I moved even slightly, our fingers would touch. And I wanted them to. "I feel like I'm intruding," I said, even though I didn't move an inch away from him. Eli chuckled. eyes still on mine. You were, technically, but I'm not mad about it. He reached across the table suddenly, brushed a crumb from the edge of my beard with his thumb. You missed a spot. The touch was barely there, but my skin burned where his hand had been. Hey, thanks for watching until this point. Please leave a comment if you're enjoying the video. It really helps us grow the channel and reach more people. And hey, thank you very much. Let's get back to story. He didn't pull away too fast either. Just let the contact linger long enough that I had to wonder, was that an excuse? Or an invitation? We moved to the living room, sat on opposite ends of a deep leather couch, and I tried not to let my leg drift toward his as we talked. He stretched his arm across the back, close enough that I felt the warmth of his skin even without touching. You always let strangers stay in your house? I asked. He smirked. Only the ones who show up looking tired but hot. My heart jumped and I turned to look at him, surprised. He shrugged, calm, like he hadn't just dropped that on me. Relax, he added. I meant what I said. Wrong door, maybe, but not the wrong guy. The afternoon sun dipped behind the trees outside, casting a soft gold through the windows, and I realized how long we'd been sitting there. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was charged. His knee brushed mine once, lightly, and he didn't move it back. Instead, his fingers traced along the couch cushion near my shoulder. Then, gently, his hand slid down, settling between us just close enough that if I turned my hand palm up, our fingers would align. I did. And they did. He looked down, then up at me. Neither of us said a word. His thumb grazed mine once, twice, and I swear to God, I felt it in my chest. I'm not usually this forward, I said quietly, voice catching a little. You're not being forward, Eli replied, leaning in just slightly. You're being exactly what you are. And what's that? Curious. He shifted closer, our knees fully touching now, and the back of his hand brushed along the outside of my thigh. I inhaled sharply, not from surprise, but from the feeling of being wanted. Like he didn't just notice me, he chose to. You're not scared to touch me, I said. His gaze didn't waver. I'm scared not to. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But his hand found its way to the back of my neck while we stood in the kitchen later, and his fingers lingered there, drawing lazy lines across my skin like he was thinking it through. I leaned into the touch without even realizing I was doing it. Tomorrow, he said suddenly, his voice low, his mouth near my ear, I can show you the trails behind the house. They're quiet. Private. I nodded. And when our foreheads touched for the briefest moment as we both turned at the same time, I didn't back away. Neither did he. When I finally went to the right Airbnb, the guest house out back, he walked me to the door. You good? He asked, fingers brushing mine again in the doorway. Yeah, I said. Better than I expected to be. He leaned against the frame. Then maybe picking the wrong place wasn't a mistake at all. And just before I stepped inside, he reached up, tucked a curl behind my ear, and let his thumb trail across my cheek. Nothing more. But enough. I didn't sleep much that night, not from discomfort, not from nerves, but because my body couldn't forget the way his hand felt on my face, the weight of his eyes just before I walked inside. Every part of me was buzzing, aware of how close I'd been to something I didn't realize I needed until I almost touched it. I woke early, the window cracked, letting in the scent of pine and morning chill, and I saw Eli out back, splitting wood, shirtless, sweat already glistening down his back as the axe met each log with clean, practiced force. His body moved like a memory, one I hadn't made yet but already knew I'd never shake. He looked up, caught me watching, and smiled like he didn't mind at all. By the time I stepped outside, he'd pulled on a worn Henley, sleeves shoved up to his elbows, chest still rising fast from the workout. He tossed me a bottle of water and nodded toward the trail just beyond the tree line. Still want that walk? I did. More than I wanted to admit. The forest was quiet except for the crunch of our boots and the low hum of birdsong. The trail wound uphill gently, sunlight breaking through branches in golden slants. He walked beside me, sometimes close enough that our shoulders brushed, other times just far enough that I missed the contact. At a bend in the trail, there was a fallen tree, moss-covered and sun-drenched, and we sat. He stretched out, legs wide, hands behind him. I sat beside him, watching the light shift across his face, and felt something inside me unravel. I don't usually do this, I said softly. Do what? Feel this much after one day? He tilted his head, studying me. Who says it's only been a day? And with that, he reached out, his hand finding my thigh, warm and steady. Not rushed. Not demanding. Just present. His touch stayed there, fingers slowly tracing the inside seam of my jeans, not in a sexual way, but in a claiming way. Like he was telling me, "You're here. I see you. I'm not pretending I don't want this." I turned to him, hard hammering. And this time, we didn't hesitate. Our lips met, slow at first, just a brush, a question. But he answered it by pulling me closer, hand at the base of my neck, tilting my head as he deepened the kiss. His mouth was warm, soft but firm, and when his tongue met mine, it was with a patience that felt like worship. I leaned into him, pressing closer, hands running along his arms, his chest, feeling the curve of his muscles and the heat of him beneath the thin fabric. He pulled me between his knees, wrapped an arm around my waist, and held me there as we kissed again, slower this time, longer. His hand slid beneath the hem of my shirt, palm grazing my lower back. And I shivered, not from cold, but from relief. We broke apart, breathless, foreheads pressed together, his thumb stroking gently behind my ear. "I haven't kissed anyone like that in a long time," I whispered. "Same," he said. "Not because I didn't want to, but because it never felt this real." I nodded. My fingers traced his jaw, the stubble rough beneath my touch. And in that quiet moment, I knew. This wasn't a fling. This was a chance. A door that opened when I walked through the wrong one. Back at the house, he didn't let go of my hand. Not as we crossed the yard. Not when we sat together on the porch steps sharing a drink. Not even when I leaned into his shoulder and closed my eyes. And when he finally stood to head inside, he pulled me up with him, fingers laced with mine, and said, "You're not sleeping out there tonight." And I didn't argue. I followed him inside like I was sleepwalking towards something I'd been dreaming of for years. Eli's fingers didn't just hold mine, they curled around them like he needed the anchor, like letting go might mean losing the weight of what had been building between us since the moment I walked through his front door by mistake. He didn't lead with urgency. He led with a kind of quiet, confident calm, like this wasn't about getting what he wanted, it was about giving me what I didn't know I needed. We reached the bedroom. Warm light spilled across thick blankets. The faint scent of cedar and worn leather clung to the air, and I could hear both our breaths, uneven but steadying as we looked at each other like there was still time to back out. "You sure?" he asked, voice deeper now, tinged with something I hadn't heard in a long time, reverence. I nodded. "I've never been more." And he didn't say another word, he just stepped into me, cupped the back of my head, and kissed me with the kind of slowness that doesn't ask for permission because it's been granted in every look, every brush of skin, every wordless moment leading up to this one. He peeled my shirt off gently, one hand guiding the hem up over my ribs, his fingers barely grazing skin but leaving heat behind in every place they passed. His eyes flicked over my body, not like a man judging, but like a man noticing, like a man taking time to learn every new inch. When his palms slid across my chest, thumbs tracing the outline of bone and muscle, I felt my stomach flutter, not from nerves, but from how seen I felt in that moment. I returned the gesture, sliding his shirt up over his solid torso, fingers grazing the trail of hair beneath his navel. He let out a breath when I touched his stomach, a quiet exhale that vibrated between us like a held-in sound finally allowed to escape. And then our bare chests met. And everything shifted. The kiss that followed wasn't just hungry, it was searching. Tongues meeting with slow precision, hands mapping territory, our hips beginning to move in rhythm, the warmth building between us like a tide that kept pulling us closer with every shared breath. Eli guided me to the bed, never rushing, never demanding. He held me as I laid back, his hands on either side of my face, his gaze locked on mine like he wanted to read the truth in my eyes before he let go of his own. I reached up, trailing my hands over his arms, feeling the muscle and the warmth, the way his body trembled just slightly, not from fear, but from holding back. "I want to remember this," he whispered, mouth close to mine. "Every second." "You will?" I breathed, kissing him again. His hand moved down my chest, over my stomach, his fingers dipping just beneath the waistband of my jeans. He didn't undress me quickly, he undressed me gently, like every layer was an invitation, not an obstacle. When his fingers slid down the inside of my thigh, I arched into him, not to speed things up, but because my body couldn't help but reach for his. He pressed his forehead to mine, both of us breathing hard now, his palm warm and grounding against my skin. We didn't speak as our clothes came off completely, we just moved. Together. A slow unraveling of distance, of doubt, of fear. His body pressed against mine fully for the first time, skin on skin, heartbeat to heartbeat, and I felt something so quiet, so real, that it made my eyes sting. This wasn't about escape. It wasn't about lust. This was choosing someone. We made love. Not with urgency, but with care. His kisses landed on my neck, my collarbone, the center of my chest like he was writing his name in warmth. His hands explored everywhere, but never without meaning. When I touched his back, his shoulders, the sides of his face, he shuddered like my hands were telling him things he hadn't heard in years. There was foreplay. There was pressure. There was surrender. And when we finally gave in completely, moving in rhythm, our bodies perfectly synced, it felt like the answer to a question we hadn't known we were both asking. We stayed tangled together for a long time after, breath soft, limbs heavy. And in the quiet, his hand smoothed across my chest, settling just above my heart. "I didn't know it could feel like this," he said. "Neither did I replied. "But it does." We drifted off like that, skin to skin, no space between us. And when the room faded and sleep finally took us, it didn't feel like falling. It felt like landing. I woke up slowly, not to an alarm or a sudden noise, but to warmth. To the feeling of a body still wrapped around mine. To the steady, grounding weight of an arm across my chest and the faint, rhythmic sound of breath against my neck. For a moment, I didn't move, not because I was afraid to disturb him, but because I didn't want to risk breaking whatever spell we had fallen into. And when I finally opened my eyes, he was already watching me. Eli's gaze was soft, a little sleepy, but fully present. "You're a quiet sleeper," he murmured. I smiled. "You're not." He laughed under his breath, the vibration of it rolling through my side. "Yeah? Did I talk?" "You muttered something about screwdrivers and pancakes." He blinked, then smirked. "Sounds like me." We stayed in bed longer than we should have. There were no schedules, no check-in times, no expectations. Just slow touches. Gentle caresses. His hand trailing lightly along my side, fingertips drawing shapes across my skin while his mouth pressed soft kisses to my shoulder. I found myself memorizing the curve of his lips, the texture of his beard against my jaw, the exact spot where his collarbone dipped slightly beneath my hand. There was something about morning afters, how they stripped everything down to what was real. The nerves were gone. The masks had fallen. All that remained was the quiet truth between us. Eli reached up, brushed hair out of my eyes, and said, "You're different than I thought you'd be." "In a bad way?" "In a real way." Eventually, we made it to the kitchen. Barefoot, shirtless, wrapped in the kind of casual comfort that only happens when two people stop pretending they're strangers. He made coffee. I found his hoodie and pulled it over my head. It smelled like him, like pine and citrus and whatever warmth lingered in the space where he slept. When he slid up behind me at the counter, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder, I closed my eyes and leaned into him fully. "You keep doing things like that," I whispered, "and I'm never leaving." "Maybe that's the idea," he replied, his voice low, his lips brushing my neck. Later that afternoon, we sat out on the porch again, the mountains quiet in the distance, sun warming our bare arms. He poured us whiskey over ice and asked, "What happens now?" I didn't know how to answer. So I asked, "What do you want to happen?" He was quiet for a beat, staring out toward the trees. Then, softly, "I want more mornings like that. And nights." He looked at me, smiled. "Especially nights." I told him about my life in the city. The job that paid well but left me drained. The apartment that felt too quiet no matter how I decorated it. The dates that blurred into each other, all promising connection but never delivering it. He listened without interrupting, without offering easy answers. And when I was done, he said, "Maybe the wrong house showed you the right kind of home." That evening, we cooked dinner together, nothing fancy, just comfort food, easy laughter, little brushes of fingers and hips as we moved in and around each other. At one point, he stood behind me again, guiding my hand on the knife as I sliced vegetables, his chest pressed to my back. His hand covered mine. His breath touched my ear. And the silence that followed said everything. We didn't make love that night. We didn't have to. We curled up on the couch, legs intertwined, heads resting in the quiet calm of knowing this thing we were building didn't need to be defined yet. It just needed to be. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the moment to end. I was supposed to check out that morning. The guest house, technically. The correct Airbnb I had mistakenly bypassed when I entered Eli's life through the wrong door, wrong code, wrong day. But everything that followed, the long conversations, the warm silence, the weight of his body over mine, the way he kissed me like we had time felt so impossibly right that the idea of packing a bag suddenly felt like betrayal. I stood at the threshold of the guest house with my hand on the doorknob, duffel at my feet, staring at my rental car like it was a getaway vehicle from a crime I didn't regret. Behind me, Eli stepped up quietly, bare feet against the gravel, coffee in one hand, the other sliding naturally across my lower back. "You're really gonna leave?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know if I could. I came out here to escape, I finally said, turning to face him. To shut the world off and try to hear myself again. He nodded slowly. And what did you hear? I looked him in the eye. You. We sat on the porch again, like we had every day since we met, 2 mugs between us, knees brushing, the sun creeping across the wood like it wanted to listen in. I told him the truth, that I didn't know what came next. That I hadn't expected him, hadn't planned on feeling so deeply after such a short time. But that I'd never felt more certain about someone in years. Eli listened, really listened, then leaned in, hand on my thigh, lips near my ear. You don't have to decide everything now, he said. You just have to not walk away from something real. I didn't. Instead, I extended the stay. I canceled my city meetings. I moved my flight. I let myself pause. Not to run from life, but to step into the one that was quietly unfolding in front of me with every smile he gave, every time he touched the back of my neck, every soft sigh he let out when I kissed him slowly in the early hours of morning. We didn't make declarations. There was no big promise or dramatic scene. Just time. Shared space. Shared skin. Shared moments. We hiked. We cooked. We touched each other like we had nothing to prove but everything to offer. There were more nights in his bed, each one slower, deeper, more certain. We made love with fewer nerves and more knowing. With rhythm, with grace, with hands that knew exactly where to go and mouths that remembered every soft spot from the night before. And in the dark, when we lay skin to skin, legs tangled, his fingers lightly drawing patterns on my chest, he whispered the thing I hadn't let myself say aloud yet. I don't want you to go. And neither did I. Weeks passed. Then a month. I stayed. First just a little longer. Then longer still. Then I stopped checking the calendar. And when I finally went home, it wasn't with goodbye, it was with plans. To return. To build. To begin again, not alone.